In the United States, Kamala Harris is due to announce her running mate Tuesday after holding a series of interviews with top contenders at her vice president's residence in Washington over the weekend. Her first public appearance as the Democratic candidate alongside that new VP nominee is set for Tuesday in Philadelphia before the two will set off on a cross-country tour across several battleground states, likely to decide the election. We're going to talk more about all of this now with political analyst Chrisitan Hanley, who joins me now. Christian, you are also a strategy consultant for the Democratic Party. I mean, break it down for us. Who are the top contenders at this point to be Kamala Harris's VP candidate?
Well, what we've heard since yesterday is that there really are the big three right now. So Josh Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania, Tim Walz of Minnesota, and then also Mark Kelly of Arizona. Mark Kelly, of course, is the husband of Gabby Giffords, who famously was a congresswoman who survived a shooting in Arizona several years ago. Mark Kelly is also a former military man and an astronaut, really is a strong contender. But there is some concern. He comes from Arizona, which, if he were to leave his current position in the Senate, that would be a bit of a risk. Tim Walz has become really a great messenger for Democrats and for Kamala Harris during this campaign. He's the governor of Minnesota, and he has that Midwestern appeal. But the thing is that Minnesota, pretty much the opposite of Arizona, is a solidly blue state. So it's not sure that he would really bring anything with him in terms of electoral votes should he join the ticket. And then there's Josh Shapiro, who's the governor of Pennsylvania, very strong contender. Pennsylvania used to be solidly blue, but as we all know from 2016, not so much anymore. He really is competence personified, really strong contender. He's probably the most logical choice out of the three, but all three are very strong contenders.
Right. And it's interesting you mentioned Josh Shapiro, because given that the very first public appearance of the two together is going to be in Pennsylvania, is that a sign, do you think, that it will be Josh Shapiro?
It could be, but then again, I believe all three were at the Naval Observatory yesterday for meetings. It seems to be the most obvious choice, Josh Shapiro, especially given the choice, like you said, of Pennsylvania, of Philadelphia for the first public appearance. But that remains to be seen. It could be any of the three, but I do think that Shapiro right now is the front runner.
Right. You work as a strategy consultant for the Democrats. I mean, strategically, what would be the best choice?
I am leaning towards Shapiro. I don't think there's any bad choices of these three. I think Tim Walz could help a lot in places like Michigan and Wisconsin because he's from a neighboring state. Mark Kelly, maybe less so, also another candidate from the far west like Kamala Harris herself. But Josh Shapiro really could bring Pennsylvania with him and also help in other Rust Belt states. He's quite a fighter. He really has been taking the case against Trump to Trump's front step. Really has been fighting back against Trump's very anti-American attacks on Kamala Harris and against the country, really. He seems to be the best positioned to help the campaign strategically by bringing in Pennsylvania's electoral votes and possibly helping as well in Michigan and Wisconsin.
Right. In the meantime, what is the Trump campaign doing these days? I mean, it does seem a bit like it's having a hard time finding just how to attack Vice President Harris where it hurts.
Yeah, no, seriously. And this was something that we were all talking about the last 2 weeks feels like a lifetime, but even just in the past 2 weeks, he really had doubled down on this whole line of attack against Joe Biden as being elderly, as being, lacking energy, not being able to keep up with it. And now he's got Kamala Harris, who is, 20 years his junior, who's a veteran prosecutor, who's full of energy. And he's trying now. I mean, he goes to Georgia and gives this speech where he's talking about the crowd size and not about his opponent. He tries calling her different names like Laughing Kamala or Lying Kamala and all these goofy things that don't really work. I mean, that was really his trademark in 2016, was finding these quick jabs against his opponents. And with Kamala Harris, none of them are sticking. In terms of strategy and direction, they're flailing right now. I mean, we were in a position back when Biden was still in the race where states that were considered to be, not in the toss-up column, like North Carolina, or excuse me, like Virginia, were considered to be maybe toss-up because Trump was pulling so far ahead after that debate. But since Kamala Harris has gotten in the race, now we're looking at not only Virginia not being a toss-up anymore, but now Republicans are on the defensive in North Carolina and elsewhere. And so they're losing ground. And I think there's really a lot of panic, and they're not seeing how they can go all of a sudden from being ahead in places like New Hampshire to falling behind in North Carolina.
And just a quick word before you go about the debates. I mean, do you think these debates are actually going to happen both between the presidential candidates and the eventual vice presidential candidate?
I mean, I sincerely hope so. I love debates. I watch debates, whether they're in our country's elections or in France or the UK or anywhere else. I love good political debates. But I think Trump has reason to be worried, and I would not be surprised if he remains chicken and stays out. He wanted to do the debates against Biden because they're both elderly men, but he can say his falsehoods with certainty and come across as strong on stage, whereas Biden could not have that same sort of theatrical performance. But against Kamala Harris, he's going to look foolish, and he knows that. And so I think he might continue to resist meeting her on stage, unfortunately.
All right, Christian, thank you for that. Christian Hanley there speaking to me
Thank you.
about that potential VP pick for the Democratic presidential candidate, Kamala Harris.